Hello, thanks for tuning in and welcome to the pool party. I hope you can swim because we're definitely diving into the deep end with a huge splash of truth, facts, evidence, information, and proof. Swim. Say what you mean. It's talk about talking. How we listen, how we hear, how we speak, how we hear what we're listening to when we speak, how a listener hears what we're saying, if what we're saying, what they're actually hearing and or understanding. Is it clear? Swim. Say what you mean. Well, that's just the beginning of understanding, because after we get that understanding, how do we accept it? How we respond if it's not what we expect is paramount. Are you okay with the truth? Are you man, woman, human, or spiritual enough to accept the truth? Let's find out. Welcome to The Swimming Pool with your host, Travis Bridges.
That would be yours truly. Good evening and welcome to The Swimming Pool. I am your host, Travis Bridges, and on Wednesday evenings at about this time, this is what we do. You may ask, what is it that we do? Well, this live stream is strictly talk about talking. I'll say that again. It's talk about talking. Well, what do you mean? Well, I have a guest standing by and I'm going to get my guest on and I'm going to explain it all to my guest because I've known my guest for quite some time, but my guest has never been on my live stream. And based on the question that was asked just a few seconds ago, my guest doesn't know what my live stream is about. So if you are a regular listener and a viewer of mine, maybe she's in for a treat, but we're going to find out soon. Anyway, this is Talk About Talking, SWIM, SWYM. That is the acronym for Say What You Mean. I think it's important that we say what we mean. Oftentimes, if we're in a conversation or if we're communicating at all, we will say what we think, feel, or believe, and not necessarily what we mean. Or we will mean something and then we'll keep it to ourselves and won't say it. I heard a preacher say a long time ago, we are created in the image of God, and the one thing that separates us more so from our Creator is what we do with our word. Our word is associated with our Creator in that our Creator has a statement that goes something similar to this as I paraphrase. The heavens and the earth will pass away, but my word will remain. Well, guess what? If we were created in that image and we said what we mean and we mean what we say, so many more things will get better in our life. And I'll start first. If I meant what I said, I would probably be about 50 pounds lighter right now. So there's my proof. I'm out in the open. If I meant what I said, I would have so many other things accomplished. But we will say something and we won't follow up with it. And we find a way to be okay with that. That's all I'm going to say before I go to my guest, and we're going to get right into it. Guest, are you there?
Hi, Travis.
Hey. Okay. Oh, I guess I could have given the rules with you listening. My audience they don't know your name. We try not to mention brands or locations or names because I want to hear the message and not necessarily the messenger. If at any time you want to say your name, that's totally on you. But I usually don't mention names because I want to hear what you're saying as opposed to so much of who you are. If there's something we want to promote, maybe whenever my live stream has like 1 million more viewers, then maybe we'll say names. But as for now, we're just going to get into talk, and the focus is going to be you saying what you mean, meaning what you say, and listening. We listen, we hear, we analyze what we hear, and we make sure that we're meaning what we're saying and we're saying what we mean. I guess I have what is considered a gift, maybe it's a curse, in listening and paying attention and sometimes holding people in general, not just my guests, accountable for what they're saying, not to catch anybody or make them wrong, but just to make sure I'm understanding what's actually coming out of someone's mouth and decipher whether or not is that just what you feel, is that just what you think, and is what you think and feel actually what's coming out of your mouth. Does that make any sense at all?
To me, does it make sense?
Yes. Does
I mean, if it's your thought, then yeah, I guess it does make sense.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's
Let's
one.
talk about it.
Pardon?
I said, so let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Well, let me tell you
Yeah.
a few. Let me tell you a few things about my live stream. Yes or no's are very important to me. Most people don't like yes or no's, and I don't force anyone to yes or no's. But if I ask a yes or no question and you can give me a yes or no answer, I would really appreciate that. If you want to explain or tell me something different outside of what I'm asking you, you can do that at a different time, as long as it's not when I'm asking you the yes or no question. So you're not going to be forced to ever do anything you don't want to do. But I would appreciate it if you could answer yes or no. But that's, the only thing I'm just going to ask in advance. But I want to talk about how I decided to have you as my guest. We were talking about it just before I came on live, but I want my audience to hear that. You okay with that?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I had a very interesting meeting today, and the meeting was just, it was incredible. I went in with an open heart, open mind, not having any certain expectations. And 2.5 hours later, I walked out with a lot of information, some knowledge, and even a plan, even a new terminology, marination time. I'll explain that at a different time. But as I was driving or riding away from that meeting, I was looking at some of the messages that I totally just dismissed while I was in the meeting. And one of the messages just happened to be on social media, and it was one of your messages. And I want to tell my audience, what your message said, and we can talk about it along with a few other things that I have in my back pocket that I'm going to share. But your message was this. It just said, "How you doing? Wait before you answer based on how you feel. Repeat after me. My cup overflows with blessings." And then you quote Psalms 23:6. Did you know you can have what you say? Our word, personal domain, our world/personal domain is formed by our words. Speak life to bleak circumstances, situations, and conditions. Keep speaking life until you see what you say. Well, that spoke directly to the situation that I was driving away from as I was leaving the meeting. And it's like there was a little doubt in my heart, although I was excited. And when I read your post, I was like, look at God. I really needed to hear that. And sometimes if you're on the right path, your speed is important, but it's not as important as your direction. If you're going in the right direction and you're consistent, chances are you will eventually get where you're going. And that just spoke to me. And when I saw that it was from you, I was like, I'm going to call her and I'm going to see if she will come on and talk to me about some other stuff. But that's what motivated me to reach out to you. Where did you get that from?
Actually, I got it from, if you notice the picture.
I didn't know who that was.
Well, that's me.
I'm
And
being
that's
funny.
a cup of coffee that I was having this morning.
Okay. All right.
And if you look closely at the cup, that's where the scripture came from.
Okay.
So
All right.
I thought, you know what? It encouraged me this morning. I thought, you know what? I'm going to have coffee in that cup specifically because of what it said. And it said that my cup overflows with blessings. And then I said, you know what? And I said it to myself. I said, yeah, today my cup overflows with blessings. And it reminded me that I could change the trajectory of my day based on the words that I spoke over myself.
Well, it resonated with me. And every word of it, I soaked it up like a piece of bread and the last bit of the soup in a bowl. Really, I just so much. Like, I haven't talked to you probably in a couple of years, and I just dialed you out of the blue, like, oh, I'm gonna reach out to her because this was such a blessing. So I'm gonna thank you for that, and I'm gonna kind of sort of move on from that. And I have a few questions to ask you before I get into something totally different. You asked me how long have I been doing this podcast / live stream, and my audience, and I only have just a few people, and I'm grateful for the supporters that I do have. I started when COVID hit. There was a time where I couldn't go out and play my saxophone and do gigs, and I needed to do something, and I was watching people go on live and sing and do all kinds of stuff. And they would put their Cash App or Zelle information up, and people were finding a way to bless those people who were still sharing their gifts, skills, and talents. So I thought, I can do that. So that's what I did. After a few weeks of playing, my music, I was getting some success from that. The first couple of weeks were very good. But as time went on, songs, you can hear your favorite songs so many times in a few weeks. I decided, okay, I would stop and I would activate my old radio skills and my ability to speak. And it started out as therapy for me, just listening and analyzing. And I came up with a few foundations that I kind of build my live stream on. And I'm going to get into those in a few. But I want to ask you some questions before I get into those, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe there's an answer to every question and a solution to every problem? Yes or no?
Yes.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Okay, I do too. I really believe there's an answer to every question. And I had a conversation with someone as recently as just not too long ago, and their answer was no. And it kind of got, elongated for whatever reason, but that's another story. But tell me why you believe there's an answer to every question and a solution to every problem. Why do you believe that?
Well, being that I'm a Christian, let's just start there. For the most catastrophic thing that's ever happened on the planet, there was a solution. And the God that I serve, who brought the solution to that problem, when earth was handed over to the enemy, God created a solution. And that solution remains in the earth for us to use. God said that he gave all authority to Jesus. When Jesus left, he gave all authority to us. So that being said, if he has the ability to create earth, to speak to it, which hence my post this morning, if he has the ability to take what is nothing and speak to it and make something out of it, and he gave man the same authority, which in the book of Genesis, when Adam spoke to the animals, notice that nowhere in history did the animals have to be renamed. Because once we say it, that's it.
Well, I appreciate that explanation, and that would, I guess, be the biblical explanation to why I believe that. But, on the heels of thanking you for your explanation of why you believe it, I want to share with you why I believe it.
Okay.
I believe it because I believe in truth, facts, evidence, and information. And I believe particularly in time of chaos and or a time where answers and solutions are necessary, presenting truth, facts, information is how you can get to the bottom of something. And I believe if anyone, and I like to give examples like husband and wife, neighbors, co-workers, and even nations. if we can stay engaged long enough as we present truth, facts, information, proof, there is absolutely no way we can't get to the bottom of anything in the form of an answer or a resolution. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
I want to add to that, the only thing that would keep particularly two people, and I'm going to start with two people before I get into nations, is what happens as we are discussing and presenting information and or reasoning. I'm sure you're familiar with the scripture where the Bible talks about brothers reasoning together. Mm-hmm. Okay. I really believe that if we reason using a particular formula, and that formula involves presenting the truth in the form of proof, information, and even evidence, that there is indeed no way that we can't reach resolve in any situation. Please tell me that also makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense.
Okay. What do you think is the number one reason two people in particular, let's start with a husband and wife, and let's start with neighbors and co-workers, just, pick from that set of groups. And what is the one reason, the main reason, we don't reach resolve when there's conflict?
Well, I think that there's differences of opinion in most cases. There's differences of perspective. When you think about life experiences between two people. So there's a, obviously there's a lot of things that factor into them being on the same page for coming to the same conclusion.
Okay, that's true, and I can see that. Can you think of one main thing as the reason is why sometimes we can't reach a resolve? Because I'd like to hear that from you. I have quite a few.
I think perspective has a lot to do with it. And things that affect your perspective could be life experience. It could be a belief system. It can be a cultural norm that one experiences and the other doesn't. So those are the fundamental things that I see that I've also experienced that bring disagreement.
So how do you get to the bottom of a situation when you have those different diversities, for lack of a better word? If a resolve needs to be reached, if a question needs to be answered, and let's just say it's two people, co-workers, husband and wife, neighbors, how do you reach resolve?
Well, I think sometimes, in my own personal experience, because I'm also biracial, so when we talk about culture, my experience in that is that I've had opportunities, because I stand in two worlds, to be able to, allow for another group of people to have an experience or a perspective that they didn't have prior to us having the conversation or the experience. So let's say, for example, if you are from a nation and you have a cultural norm, and the conflict is with someone else who doesn't have that cultural norm. Well, depending on how they relate to you, let's say if it is a husband and wife, the person would need to love you enough to have compromise to incorporate that part of your life into their life.
Okay.
So it may not be an absolute melding together, but at least there's an acceptance.
Okay.
So that it doesn't bring conflict anymore. You see?
Okay, I can definitely see that. You ever heard the saying, there's three sides to every story? There's your story, there's their story, and then there's the truth. You ever heard that?
Yes, I've heard that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. If there is a truth, what difference does it make what someone else's side of the story is? I want to restate that, and I just want you to answer exactly what I ask you. If there is a truth, what difference does it make what your side of the story is or my side of the story is?
If there is a truth, what difference does it matter what your side of the story is or my side of the story?
As it relates to resolving conflict.
Well, I would imagine the person holding on to their version of what that truth is. So they'd have to, in order for for the conflict to resolve, that means that they have to have a commonality of what that truth actually is, right?
A commonality, that's a good key word. Okay. If there's, I'm for lack of a better word, I'm going to call it a formula. Okay. As it relates to conflict, and I'm going to try to, for the sake of time, as it relates to resolving conflict, and you said something about commonality, there's three things that I like to introduce into resolving conflict. There's a universal principle, and I could explain that if I need to, but I don't think I do. Universal principles. There's something called points of references, and there's something called law. Anytime there's a conflict and you can run whatever the conflict is through those filters, I believe you get to a common denominator that is commonality that would kind of sort of negate what I think or what I feel or what I believe as it relates to what has been established as truth. I believe truth is built on universal principles first, with another layer of points of references, and then law would also be either at the top and or the bottom of that tier. Does that make sense?
I can see that. Mm-hmm.
So, if, for example, if there's a conflict and whatever you're saying, if it equates to universal principles or points of references, or if it lines up with, I'm saying equates, I guess that's the same, and or the law, what you're saying would be closer to the truth if it is in line with a universal principle, a point of reference, and or a law. Because you can't have chaos and have two things kind of lining up. One is going to be off in those areas. I'm kind of going somewhere, but I'm hoping you're able to.
I'm tracking with you, assuming that both people subscribe to that universal truth.
I don't want to call it a truth, a principle, a universal.
Okay, because I thought I heard you say universal law. Okay, so it's a universal principle. So whatever the universal principle is, I would imagine that both parties must subscribe to it in order for there to be a commonality there.
Well, that's exactly, because if two people are subscribing to a commonality, then there would not be any chaos or there would not be any resolution necessary. If you and I are walking together, if we are agreeing, we can walk together. I am specifically referencing times when there's chaos and or disagreement. So when there's a disagreement, there's one side, there's another side, and then there's a commonality that starts with a universal principle. Meaning two people will need to be able to agree if they're going to walk together. And if two people are not agreeing, they are kind of off-centered to universal principles, points of reference, and or law.
Right. It goes back to the principle of being equally yoked. Right?
Well, yes. And I guess that would, from my cultural background, that was mostly associated with marriage and two people being together in a union of some sort. But equally yoked,
that could be in business.
Yeah, it could be
in friendship, because a yoke is something that holds you together as you walk in the same direction, which means you'd have to be kind of headed in that direction together.
Right. So, which brings me to part of what I'm trying to get to. is if there's a disagreement of any kind, or conflict, or a place where there needs to be a resolution, how do you resolve it?
Well, I mean, if you have a common, okay, so we call this the universal principle. I would imagine built into the universal principle are also the guidelines for which you govern other parts of your life, including conflict.
Very good. That's true. So
there
okay.
you have guidelines that if you both subscribe to, you'd revert to the guidelines for instruction.
Okay, I think we're on the same page now, which brings me to the question I ask you: why is it that there is conflict? And we can start with two people first. If two people have a situation where there needs to be a resolution, why do they not come to a peaceful place if they are using universal principles, points of reference, and law? What is the number one thing you can think of that would cause two people to not agree if they are using those filters to run whatever the chaos or disagreement is through?
Well, I mean, because I don't know because we're human, right? We're multifaceted, which means that at any given time, you may not be on the same page, walking in the same direction for whatever reason.
Okay.
Starting out, like I said, it could be the fundamentals of cultural differences. It could be the fundamentals of experiences. It could be the fundamentals of life experiences that have caused trauma, which makes somebody get stuck on the path. One person is advanced and the other person not yet. And sometimes one has to slow down to help the other catch up. So there's a variable. I mean, because you think about the process of walking forward. When I think of this, I think of what I said earlier, the equally yoked concept, where there's two people harnessed together walking in one direction. That means that you're may not have the same pace. You may be going in the same direction. You may have the same destination in mind, right? But the pace might be different for one than the other.
Okay.
That's automatically going to bring a conflict.
Okay, based on that, okay, that's a pace. I guess you could say that, and I don't want to disagree with you, but a pace is not necessarily a conflict, because that could easily be resolved. Either the person that's going, like you said, a person would slow down or speed up with the person. Not that that's not.
That's not always something that's given. I mean, you have people with different temperaments. I think of it in business, or even when you think of finances in a relationship. You have one person who's aggressively saving, the other one who likes to spend. Those are two different paces, and that causes conflict. Many relationships fall apart because of financial conflict, and that primarily is the conflict where the pace of how they choose to spend or save are different. Now, can it be resolved? Of course. If you sit down and you both agree on the goal, then there are adjustments that have to be made, and that's where compromise comes in play.
That's a new word. I wish there was a way we can back up and just scratch that out, because we would probably need a whole another live stream if we introduced that word. I was trying to stay away from that. I guess I'm going to try to, for the sake of time, I'm going to try to cut. And this is where it might get a little funky, if I could use that word. I really think the primary reason situations are not resolved is because of, God help me. Give me 3 seconds to pray. Help me, Lord. When we use the word ego, it can be taken into so many different texts. But I think the primary reason that most resolve is not reached is because of personal preferences, personal beliefs, personal thoughts and feelings. Those things create problems when you're trying to reach a resolve, especially if you have universal principles as a filter, if you have points of references as a filter, and if you have law as a filter. if you start to add in personal feelings and beliefs, there's definitely going to be conflict. So my suggestion and answer would be to find solutions to identify when one or both people are introducing or injecting those things, personal beliefs, feelings, thoughts, and even preferences. There is a time for that. If I want chocolate and there's vanilla and chocolate, I can choose that as a preference, but that's not necessarily a conflict. It's just a preference, and I get to choose that. But in the middle of conflict, removing those things and including those principles that I just mentioned, I believe is a big start to how we can reach resolution and find answers.
I mean, listen, the bottom line to the whole idea is if you have two humans, you're automatically going to have the multifaceted layers of...
I agree with that 100%.
So there's no way around it. It's automatic conflict just because you've got two people who are individuals with independent thought processes, independent life experiences prior to coming together for whatever thought that they're coming together on. So just, and I believe the whole concept of life in general, especially when it relates to marriage, is how do you unpack that and become one?
Well, that's the path that I'm going down, and I'm introducing the answer to that. I'm introducing the answer to how you become one, or how do you resolve conflict, or how do you dissipate chaos. And I really think it starts with, first of all, having a commonality, having a place to go to as a safe base. If there's rules and guidelines that cannot be broken, how I feel about it, what I believe or what I think about it makes it irrelevant. I said that in the beginning. If something is truth and a fact, or a fact and truth, and I feel a different way about it, what difference does it make? What difference does my feelings make?
It makes a difference. It makes a difference because you get to have feelings. That's why you're human.
I'm not contesting that.
So the thing is that to negate the ability for two people to have a feeling about it, it's where you have to accept even the conflict.
Okay, I get that. I not once have said negate anyone's feelings. Let me just say for the record, feelings are very necessary. Beliefs are necessary. Thoughts are very necessary. However, in a time of conflict, those things cannot necessarily be primary in resolving the conflict if a universal principle is the first level of filter. If there's something, if let's say gravity, and I'm going to use an outlandish example. If you and I are on the third floor and I say to you, hey, let's jump down head first and see how we feel when we get down to the bottom. There's a universal principle that says gravity is going to pull us down fast and hard. And if our skull hits the concrete first, it's likely going to crack and we may not live. If at best we will have, at least life-threatening injury from the third floor. Would you at least agree with that universal principle?
Oh, for sure. I mean, first of all, there's been proven facts so that you don't have to even do it.
Right. Okay. So that's exactly my point. If that's a universal principle, and most problems that we have can be ruled out, can be filtered through principles, points of references, and or law, how I feel about it, what I believe about, I believe I'm going to live, but my belief is not strong enough to make me try that. So I guess the point I'm making, and I'm going to try to close because I want to be honest with my time here or faithful to my time. How I feel about that universal principle is irrelevant. Would you at least agree?
Wait, repeat that last statement that you made.
Okay. The example that I gave you involves gravity and the likelihood of what would happen if you actually took that action. Head first, third story building, no parachute, no net, concrete on the ground. Okay? That is a universal principle in terms of gravity and your head hitting the concrete, with the concrete being harder than your skull and the skin on your head. Chances are you know what's going to happen. That's not only a universal principle, it is a point of reference for those who it has happened to. And actually, by law, if you push someone, you will probably, be charged and sentenced for that. So universal principle, the point of reference in the law. How I feel about whether you jump or I jump is irrelevant to the fact of the universal principle. Yes or no?
How you feel about it is irrelevant?
How I feel about that happening, if either one of us take that action, is irrelevant. Let's just say I don't believe it's going to happen.
So, okay, I get your point. So you can't just wish it away and say it's not going to happen. It's absolutely going to happen.
You can, but
regardless of how you feel about it.
Exactly. That same principle can be applied to any kind of chaos, any kind and every kind, which supports there's an answer to every question and there's a solution to every problem. However, how we feel, what we think, and how, our beliefs about those problems, especially in chaos, doesn't have to take a back seat, because our feelings are important, and I'm not negating anyone's feelings. But when we have chaos and we want to resolve chaos for peace, sometimes when proof and facts have been presented and universal principles, if you pour water inside of a computer, is it going to work? Yes or no?
Chances are it probably won't.
Probably not. So So once that has been concluded, how I feel about it, that's the problem. You want to pour water in it, I don't. Well, you're saying, I just want to wash it. Well, I'm like, just get a little alcohol and wipe it over. No, I want to put it in the dishwasher because I feel like I want it clean. I'm being outlandish for a reason. And in my final close, I believe there's an answer to every question. There's a solution to every problem. It starts with doing the best we can to withdraw our personal beliefs, personal feelings, in reaching resolve. Not saying don't have them, not saying don't share them, not saying don't use them. But if you're going to get to the bottom of any resolve and you have your feelings as a primary interjection, it's probably going to be more chaos. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to let you close. I think I've done my best to at least make the point. I hope I made sense. And I want you to close based on whatever you feel, think, or believe about everything that I just said or what we just discussed.
I agree with you that there's certain principles that you're not going to get a positive outcome going against them because they are already what they are. However, I do believe in resolving conflict. The skill is there's not a linear path from point A to point B, from chaos to conflict, especially when you're dealing with humanity. So I think you have to do a little bit more digging and have a little bit more patience and grace and compromise and some other words that we didn't bring up in the conversation that I'm sure will open up a whole nother can for a later topic.
Let me interject real quick. Compromise involves removing personal feelings, thoughts, or beliefs, yes or no?
I wouldn't say removing them, no, not 100%.
No, not 100%.
Is the incorporation of another thought and belief into the one that you already have. It doesn't change what you have. If you would decide you wanted tacos for dinner and your wife decided she wanted fajitas for dinner, Well, if you guys settle on tacos, it doesn't mean that she's never going to want fajitas or doesn't still want it. It just means that she's allowed your belief and your thought process based on your relationship and to have flexibility to support it.
Right.
So by that, alleviating conflict, not doing away with her emotional thought process or her,
But
her
in order for her to do that, she would have to put aside what she wants in order to do
That's
that.
what I said. She put it aside, but she didn't do away with it. Because guess what? Next week she may decide, or tomorrow for dinner she might decide that fajitas is for dinner because today you got tacos.
Right, but that particular next week and tomorrow is a whole different time. The conflict right now is it going to be tacos or fajitas? Because she put her feelings aside for that, we resolve that conflict. If there's
resolved an immediate conflict, right?
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Next week and tomorrow is a different conflict that we would have to then do the same thing. If it involves compromise, somebody's going to have to.
And that's the dance. That's the dance. And it's not automatic when you have two people who have free will and free thought.
Okay.
So there's always you can always be brought to a place of conflict because sometimes conflict is actually beneficial. If you ever meet a woodworker who polishes furniture, he'll tell you it is. Because the heaviest sandpaper makes the finest piece of furniture. And I'll end on that note.
Okay. Well, I am so grateful. I started with saying that this is therapy for me. And having these kinds of conversations, sometimes they get ugly and sometimes they get, back and forth. And I'm glad this one didn't get that way, and I'm hoping you still love me because we kind of went to a place of where we were kind of doing a little dance. But I'd like to discuss things, and I will always, this is how I'm going to close. I don't know what happened to me or why it happened to me, but I believe that through my life experiences, I am 100% convinced that there is an answer to every question. There's a solution to every problem. I believe if people are willing to be engaged enough and they're willing to weigh information, evidence, proof, and facts for truth, that there is, a place of resolve. And I think I'll use your word. Now I'm going to introduce it. Thanks for saying it earlier. If there's room for compromise, then there is always, even more so, an opportunity for resolving conflict. So, just going to leave it right there. Thank you so much.
Listen, but thank you for having me. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Okay, and you didn't know a lot about, what I'm doing. I'm going to send you the link to this live stream, and you can look at some of the other stuff. It's kind of interesting, and I don't ever want to be viewed as controversial, but I can't stop what people think. I really like engaging in communication that invokes thought. And I tend to do that for myself, and hopefully my guest will be enlightened as well. Tell me before you go, what are your thoughts about what just happened in the last 40 minutes?
It was an interesting dialogue. I mean, going into it, I didn't have a clue what we were going to talk about. So, I didn't have a preconceived idea of anything. So I enjoyed it.
Okay. All right. But you feel okay?
Oh, yeah. I feel fine.
Okay. Thank you so much. Can we do it again?
I mean, I didn't take it personal. If that you mean, listen, I'm a communicator.
So we can do it again sometime?
Sure.
You promise?
Yeah.
Can we do it again within the next 45 days?
Possibly. I'd have to know the dates and find out what's going on in my life during that time. So yeah, we can talk about it.
Awesome. I love you. I appreciate you. And thank you again so much. I would like to, again, read your post today before we go, and we'll close on that, if that's okay.
Sure.
This will be the last thing. I'm going to try to read kind of dignified because I like the way it sounded and it was such a blessing to me. And thank you again for posting it. And it goes as follows. How you doing? Wait before you answer based on how you feel. Repeat after me. My cup overflows with blessings. Psalms 23:6. Did you know you can have what you say? Our word, personal domain, is formed by our words. Our world, personal domain, is formed by our words. Speak life to bleak circumstances, situations, and conditions. Keep speaking life until you see what you say. That was a blessing to me then. I will read it a few more times before the week is out, and I hope that everyone else who had the opportunity to read that from wherever you got it from will be blessed as much as I was. Thanks again for sharing it, and I look for more stuff that you will share in the future.
Amen. Well, I'm glad that it blessed you, and I pray that, whatever the conflict that you had today and the circumstances, that it works out in your favor.
It definitely will. I have no other expectations. As a matter of fact,
Amen.
I'll give you a victory report within the next, 90 days.
Okay, I look forward to hearing about it.
All right, we'll chat soon.
Okay.
All right.
Have a good night.
Okay, you too. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
There you have it, my friends. Another edition of SWIM, SWIM. That is the acronym for Say What You Mean. I think it's important that we say what we mean. Saying what we feel, think, believe is nothing wrong with that. Do it. However, in times of conflict, consider allowing your feelings only to take a back seat to information that you discover, especially if you stay engaged long enough with someone to hear either their side of a story, and perhaps they will do the same with you in hearing your side, so that the truth can be revealed and or conflict can be resolved. Again, I am convinced there is an answer to every question. There is a solution to every problem. We just have to find a formula. I suggested one, and I will, until I am proven wrong in some kind of way, I will continue to suggest that. So with that being said, have yourself a good night. Take good care of yourself. Enjoy the rest of your week. And whatever you do, find someone that you need to say I love you to. Don't just say it, but show it and mean it. Good night.
SWYM. Say what you mean. As much as this information is designed to bring awareness to how we listen, hear, and process, it is also a form of therapy. The little person inside of all of us needs to be heard. As adults, even listening to ourselves is a form of healing, strengthening, and growth. It's okay to speak, talk, express yourself, and be heard, even if you're the only listener. If our testimony does anything at all for anyone else, that makes the continued effort worth the time. Get the words out. You'll feel better, and that's a promise. Thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it.
Sometimes it seems like all the good times are gone, but you got to keep on searching. You got to keep on keeping on. Keep on keeping on. For example, take me, stand right here today. I would not be here with you if I believed the things that the people say. You got to keep on searching. Keep it on the cold side. Keep on